Dynasty Warriors 3 Extreme Legends was a good attempt at bringing additional content to its base game for the time, and while it was serviceable and brought a range of improvements that became mainstays of the Musou series as a whole, nowadays it leaves a bit to be desired for me. Its sequel Dynasty Warriors 4 was nothing short of breathtaking, and is still among the greatest games in the series. Naturally following what has become a Musou tradition, KOEI released the new Extreme Legends set of content for the game not even a year later. With the game already as stellar as Dynasty Warriors 4, and with such a short time for turnaround for its expansion, is the Extreme Legends content worth your time? How has the standalone expansion held up? And if for some reason you don't have access to the original content in Dynasty Warriors 4, is Dynasty Warriors 4 Extreme Legends still worth playing as a standalone title? Let's find out. Dynasty Warriors 4 Extreme Legends had a very short turnaround off of the original game, releasing less than a year after 4 in all territories. As with other Extreme Legends expansions, all new content doesn't require the vanilla game to be played, but save data can be transferred over from Dynasty Warriors 4, and the original game's data can also be imported by using the Load Original option, allowing the player to play all content from both builds of the game. There are two new modes that ship with the game. The first of these is Legend Mode, which will become a mainstay of all future Extreme Legends games released. This is also where I personally spent the majority of my time with the game, and alone makes the Extreme Legends experience worth it in my opinion. Legends Mode had some of the best stages in a Warriors game to date. There is significantly more variety than in the standard missions of Musou and Free Mode. In Liu Bei's stage, you're actively trying not to kill many of the enemies in the stage while taking out other key players, which changes how the game feels completely. Another standout stage is that of Zheng Wei's, where you had to juggle between taking out the enemy while also blocking Liu Chan from reaching them and surrendering by going back and forth between two gates and closing them before he reaches each of them. It led to a really hectic experience that I haven't felt often in any of KOEI's other games. These are just two examples, but there are quite a few stages that focus on scenarios found in the Romance of the Three Kingdoms novel that were rarely ever seen again during the games, and give a nice injection of personality into a lot of the game's characters that didn't get to shine in the original's faction-focused story mode. Almost all the stories are very well written, or at least interesting, even if the stages themselves are reused assets from Dynasty Warriors 4. You're given a grade at the end of each stage based on how well you played. Clearing the stage allowed it to be run with any character, and achieving the highest rank on the hardest difficulty unlocks the ultimate level 11 weapons, which were unfortunately never seen again in another Dynasty Warriors game. The second major mode introduced to the game is the Roguelike Xtreme mode, where you try to win as many battles as possible without dying. You're given a handful of potential missions to choose from at a time, each with their own rewards and differences in difficulty. Defeating enemies and completing different objectives earns you points, which factor into the amount of gold acquired at the end of a level. You don't gain health back between stages. Instead, you can purchase items that restore your health in between missions, or use your precious gold to buy upgrades that better your character in the long run. Do you risk dying or losing health by attempting to kill officers during stages for their permanent stat boosters? Or do you remain content with your character and go straight to the final boss for the mission rewards, all the while knowing the mode's difficulty will steadily increase, making your characters less and less viable as their stat progression stagnates? It's up to you. It's an interesting choose-your-own-adventure mode, and would become another staple mode of the Extreme Legends expansion series. There are actually quite a decent amount of changes to the gameplay with the expansion, all for the better. The enemy AI has been tweaked to result in a greater level of challenge at the game's higher difficulties. Enemy officers are much more adept at guarding your attacks and are considerably more aggressive than they were in the base game. They use their Musou attacks more often, will taunt you to perform guard breaks, and even juggle you if given the chance. You can now see an enemy's Musou dodge when performing duels against them. Your opponents will also react differently during duels depending on whether or not your Musou meter is full. I feel this made the somewhat broken duels of the vanilla version a bit more fair, and I still wish this mechanic became a mainstay of the series. It could have become something really special with a bit more refinement. Two new difficulties are added to the game, including Novice and Expert modes. Playing on Expert mode greatly increases the difficulty over the game's hard mode, and similar to Dynasty Warriors 3 Extreme Legends, gives enemies their own level 10 ultimate weapons. The challenge is worth it, however, as successful runs on Expert are the primary way to unlock the supreme level 11 weapons I mentioned previously. These are some of the most interesting looking weapons in the Dynasty Warriors series as a whole, and for some reason weren't brought back in games like Dynasty Warriors 5 Extreme Legends or the Orochi crossovers. If you're looking for a challenge with a nice reward to it, getting all the new ultimate weapons is a great experience that I can recommend the game off all by itself. Both level 10 and 11 weapons and your character stats are now carried over in the game's challenge modes, making these modes a bit more worth playing through now compared to in the original game. There's also one additional stage here known as Arena Mode, where you face a series of duels with increasing difficulty. I'm still not a huge fan of the challenge mode, but this is one of the better stages available in it, and overall I like the changes made. There are 9 new rare items that can be unlocked in the game. Most of these are really good, and are somewhat necessary if you want to survive on expert mode before unlocking the game's new weapons. It's overall a great mix, and I wish more of these became mainstays in the series. There are also some very small quality of life tweaks introduced in the game. You can now see the weapon experience you've earned at the end of stages. You're also now able to reset characters and weapon levels in the game. In terms of graphical and audio presentation, there isn't much difference compared to the vanilla experience. I will say the game does seem to run a bit more smoothly than the vanilla version, possibly due to the smaller, more focused maps in the game's new modes, but maybe there were some subtle tweaks under the hood to make everything a bit more stable. Dynasty Warriors 4 Xtreme Legends brings a lot of new content to the game. You could blow through most of the game's new Legend Mode stages in 10 to 15 hours or so, and be done, but going for all the new items and weapons could easily make this a 50-hour experience on its own. And there are potentially hundreds of hours of additional content depending on how interested you are in the game's Extreme mode. Unfortunately, Dynasty Warriors 4 Xtreme Legends was only released on the PlayStation 2, despite the base game also being released on both the original Xbox and the PC. The PS2 version of the base game was the worst of the 3 in terms of sheer performance, so it would have been nice to remix this into some of the more stable builds. With that said, Extreme Legends can be played independently of the original, and goes for pretty cheap nowadays. I'm also happy to state that this Extreme Legends experience is completely worth experiencing even without being played as extra content loaded in with the original game. So if you really wanted to, there's nothing stopping you from playing the Xbox or PC versions of Dynasty Warriors 4 and just trying this one out on its own. In conclusion, do I think Dynasty Warriors 4 Extreme Legends is worth playing? Absolutely. I go back and forth between which Musou experience is my quote-unquote favorite, but I certainly wouldn't argue with someone if they thought Dynasty Warriors 4 with the Extreme Legends content was the best build of the series. Whether you play Extreme Legends by itself for a more peculiar set of stories than what is typically found in Dynasty Warriors, or for the higher stakes experience in Extreme mode, or if you just play this as a set of add-on content for the original game, I think any Musou fan will be in for a superb, unforgettable experience. Thanks for tuning into my review of Dynasty Warriors 4 Extreme Legends. If you liked this video, be sure to drop a like, and don't forget to subscribe for more retrospective reviews of the Musou series. Let me know your favorite moments from Dynasty Warriors or other Musou games in the comments below. Thanks for watching!